on this question, but knowing that there are experts out there in a variety of different fields who are in fact developing solutions to these problems. So it isn't, I don't want you to be, to despair. I think that we have answers we can provide to particular aspects of these problems, but not maybe to the problem writ large. But that's because, and there is no one person who can provide a problem or an answer to the problem writ large. But there are a lot of people, a lot of very committed individuals out there who are providing bite-sized answers to bite-sized aspects of the problem.
I'm going to bounce off of his question just a little bit. But my question is when you're looking at these historically underserved areas that are generally low income, how do you drive economic development without also pushing gentrification forward?
That's a Nate question.
That's a really good question. So actually this is an article that's written by Randy Stoker. He's a great urban scholar who's done a lot of writing on community development corporations, and he criticizes these nonprofits, and he accuses them of acting more as developers with capitalistic principles versus nonprofits with the ability to go in and to improve living conditions and not pushing people out. And often what happens is, even with nonprofits who focus on housing, they'll go in, they will redo a neighborhood, and rent will triple, and then low-income individuals who are there are then priced out. There's really no, one answer in terms of how you address the situation. But one is if the CDC is community controlled, then they have the power to say who can come in to their community. And actually, what some CDCs actually do, and what I found in my research is what they'll do is they will work with the local planning department, and they will develop a comprehensive plan for that neighborhood. And so anytime that anybody wants to develop, it has to fit that schematic that they want. And a lot of neighborhoods have been very successful in working with planning departments, and ensuring that the integrity of their neighborhoods stay, so you're not having people come in to outprice other individuals. So again, partnering with local government is really instrumental. If you want to ensure that individuals can afford to live in that neighborhood, once people come in, developers or nonprofits or private sector come in to improve those living conditions.
I have an opinion question. I definitely agree that education is the solution to decreasing crime, and I agree that family values are a large detriment to that. But facts still show that the largest predictor of success in primary and secondary education is, of course, socioeconomic status. So what is your opinion on income equality and a livable minimum wage as a solution?
I think, let me just reiterate a point I made earlier. So yes, values have an impact, but values don't exist in a vacuum. People don't just develop values because they're good people. Some people exist in circumstances that facilitate their embrace of some values and some people don't. So it's a little too easy, I think, to point to the lack of success of some groups and say, well, if they can only just embrace the right values. Well, values are important and people do have agency, and so you shouldn't excuse that. But we live in a larger society where we're influenced by all manner of forces, impersonal forces that we've had no particular direct impact on. So we should be mindful of that as well. It's a very complex interaction is the point I wanted to make. In reaction to the point or the question you had about socioeconomic status and how its impact is on success in the educational arena, of course that's true. Success on GRE or GMAT or SAT scores, the best predictor of those things is, if you pick the right parents, and if you pick parents who happen to be very affluent. So all of that suggests that doing something, actions that can be taken by government, which is to say by all of us, actions that are taken by government that might raise the minimum wage, which is historically low, particularly when you index that for inflation, might actually be consequential. There might actually be something to that. Yes, maybe if you pay people a little bit more, maybe they won't be so destitute. And maybe they will be in a position to embrace the kind of values that we all think that they should embrace.
You know, I do think socioeconomic barriers, I do believe they exist. I do believe that they are challenges. You know, but I in my opinion, I do think that values play more of an important role in ensuring quality education. And unfortunately, while there may be barriers to education, they're very inherent in our society, and we do know that resources are often disproportionate compared, you know, in African American neighborhoods compared to, let's say, Caucasian neighborhoods. But at the same time, I do think that values and even, you know, those so to say superheroes do play an important part in ensuring that we do get quality education. And unfortunately, you know, that's how it often happens in African American neighborhoods, and you have people who work at the grassroots level to ensure, you know, that, you know, we receive quality goods or public services. And and even with these barriers, you know, that we know that all exist, I do think that oftentimes it's because of those people who are in the community who are very passionate or possess those values that fight on our behalf. And even with all these socioeconomic barriers I had growing up, if I didn't have those values, I don't think I would have succeeded. But.
Yeah, I'll just very briefly, and I think Nate and I have more of a difference of emphasis more than outcomes, I think. I think it is important, I mean, because this is really partly why I'm jumping back in here and not being polite enough to allow Kirk or someone else to jump in. It's because I think this is not a trivial matter. We need to be, when we try to understand why there's inequality in society, we should make sure whatever our particular political ideological values are about these matters, we should make sure that we get it right. Because the implications for what we think the source is of that inequality is very important. So I say that in order to make the following point. The point of view that I express here this evening, or that Nate expresses, you should not be swayed by either one of them just based on our apparent, you know, how loquacious we are or how articulate we seem to be. I mean, there is a right answer to whether or not the earth revolves around the sun. We don't need to express what we think our opinion is. There is a social science that seeks to answer these questions. Is it the case that values are most responsible for how people perform in the educational arena, or is it the case that other factors matter? There is a right answer to that question. That question is not based on opinion. We should rely upon the experts who have examined these questions to determine what that right answer is.
And I would just say, if you look throughout human history, there have always been heroes, there have always been leaders that led any group, every group, to higher standards and higher levels of standard of living. And so I don't think that it's fair to say, you know, we've got to have those leaders. We have to provide an opportunity for those people to rise up and lead, because everybody, sadly, is not a leader, never have been. And so part of our system has to recognize those leaders and give them an opportunity to shine when they present themselves from whatever walk of life they come.
I guess I'll give my social science response. And so I think it'd be good for whoever takes the office of the presidency to really rely on, I don't think at times the presidency does rely on academics or their research arms, offices of research, to kind of really give them a full picture of kind of what's going on. So, for example, my research shows that nonprofits, community-based nonprofits, for example, are instrumental in decreasing poverty, unemployment, and vacant housing within urban neighborhoods. And so, again, so that would say to, you know, somebody's president that, okay, hey, maybe we should rely on these nonprofits to address these issues because they're so close to it, and many of them work on grassroots levels to address these issues. And so I would like this president to really take into account kind of what the evidence says, then also, you know, focusing on their personal opinion or ideological values in terms of addressing these issues, but really look at kind of like what research says about these problems.
Politics is not so much about, well, at times politics is about what is the answer that the most people agree is consistent with their values. And sometimes it's about what is the right answer. So there's objective reality, and then there's about what people, based on their principles and their values, find most desirable. So I get that sometimes there's a clash between those two. With respect to the short answer to the question, the last question about what our wise advice would be to the presidential candidates, you know, this country does face some serious problems. That doesn't mean that everything is going to hell in a handbasket, but it does mean that there are some issues that are non-trivial that have festered for some time that need to be addressed, some of which we've discussed this evening. So the theme of the panel was about, as I understand it, race in communities, urban communities, and about ways in which to try to address issues of disadvantage. The advice I would give to the presidential candidates, to the, you know, in the fantastic world in which they might actually listen to the advice I might provide, would be that if we're really serious as a country about addressing these issues, given the theme of the panel this evening, I'll just say issues with respect to race, but it could deal with other more broader issues as well. If we're really serious about addressing those issues, then we need to target resources at those various communities. It is not the case that resources alone will necessarily solve the problem, but certainly they are a necessary, if not sufficient, condition for solving those problems. If we are concerned about addressing racial inequality in this country, and sometimes we give lip service to the notion that we might be, then by all means we need to address and target resources at racial inequities. We can't simply pretend that addressing broader issues will somehow trickle down to these other disadvantaged communities. And we shouldn't be afraid to say that communities that have been disadvantaged based on government actions and government inactions over decades and indeed centuries, we should not be afraid that given that history in this country, it is somehow inappropriate to have government assist the very communities that are in the position they're in, largely because of government action and inaction in the past.
Well, to answer your question, a rising tide floats all boats. So the answer I would like to say is, you know, it is the economy, stupid, and work on the economy. At the same time, you can't do that blindly, because in this country we have had, we now have a historic difference between the poorest and the richest. And so this great divergence of wealth and the loss of the middle class, or the losing out of the middle class, is something that I think we have to address. The way we do that in our system is with a system of taxing and spending. And I'm not advocating necessarily a redistribution of wealth in the sense that it was tried in the 60s. When you get to an income tax rate of 70%, you do reduce the entrepreneurial spirit. We don't want to go there again. But we do need to do something in this country to address the diversity of resources that we have from the very top to the very bottom. And we can do that at the same time that we raise the rest of the economy. So it's tough because we have built a political system that is funded by the very top. And so therefore our elected officials become beholden to those people. And we even have a recent Supreme Court decision that made it worse. Every time we try to reform election finance, the Supreme Court seems to reverse the rules. But what we've got is the fox in the hen house in that regard, and we need to do something in this country to reverse that.